Okay. Good evening, everybody. I'm Martin Nye, the Chair of the Soil Association's Board of Trustees. Thank you for joining this, our annual general meeting. Holding it as an online event allows more of our members and supporters to attend. We've got about 500 people who say they're going to join us tonight, and we're recording the event so we can make it even more widely available. As with so much in life, the combination of humans and technology just might go wrong, so please bear with us if we do have any glitches. Everyone entering the event is automatically muted and you can't be seen on the screen by other attendees. There is a chat bar where you can say hello and tell us where you're dialing in from. Thanks to those of you who've already sent us questions in advance. You can also ask questions as we go, so please post questions in the questions tab. We will answer as many as we can today in the chat or later in the meeting, and any questions that we don't get to answer tonight, we'll respond to later. Our agenda tonight is as follows. After I've said a few words, I'll hand over to Nicola Spencer, our Group Resources Director, who will give you an update on our financial performance and governance. Nicola will be followed by Helen Browning, our Chief Executive, who will share with you the positive impact all the teams at the Soil Association have been able to achieve this year thanks to the support you are giving us. Next, Rose Lewis from Woodoaks, the farm owned by our land trust near Rickmansworth, will update us about what's been going on at the farm over the past 12 months on our journey to organic conversion. We then welcome Eddie Bailey, an expert on the soil food web and the importance of soil health, followed by the Q&A session chaired by James Cashmore, the Managing Director of the charity, before Helen closes the meeting. Hopefully that will all knit together to give you, our members, a good overview of what we've been up to over the last year. It has been a challenging year with ongoing environmental, political and economic turmoil impacting us all. Although organic markets in the UK are growing, many farmers, growers and producers are under real financial pressure. Many people continue to experience the cost of living crisis. Despite increasing public scrutiny and indeed public anger, damage to our environmental and natural systems continues to be inflicted by over-intensive farming and careless land use. The Soil Association continues to work to promote long-term, systemic, joined-up solutions to these challenges that are resilient and fair to all. We are helping farmers find routes to improving the ecological and financial health of their farms. We're working to ensure healthy and sustainable diets become the norm, but we can't do this on our own. We know that to achieve real and lasting impact, we need to join forces with citizens, communities, other organisations, and those companies that are genuinely trying to build their businesses on sustainable principles. We also need to influence policymakers. It remains to be seen whether the new government will bring joined-up thinking to their policies. Let's hope so. In any case, we will continue to advocate for solutions that are nature-based, properly grounded in the real world, based on facts and data, and deliverable at scale and at pace. You are a vital part of helping us do this. Thanks to all our supporters for joining forces with us. We simply cannot do what we do without you. I also want to thank all our staff and trustees for their hard work, commitment and inspiration. I hope you find the talks tonight inspiring and will continue to support us and indeed encourage others to join us. I'm now going to hand over to Nicola, our Group Resources Director, to talk about finance and governance.
Thanks very much, Martin, and good evening, everyone. Yes, I'm going to talk through some of the key figures from our annual accounts for the last financial year, which ended on the 31st of March 2024. The charity's income totaled 8.1 million last year, which was an increase of almost 12% compared with the previous year. Our donations grew, and despite the economic pressure on many of our supporters, the level of membership subscriptions held steady, which we are really thankful to everyone for. Whilst those income streams are smaller than some of the other categories, they fund our core charitable work and are absolutely vital to us. So thank you to everyone for your continued membership and any donations that you were also able to give last year. Legacies that supporters leave to us in their wills are also very important to the charity. The amount can vary quite a bit year on year, and we had a lower level last year after a couple of very generous legacies in the previous couple of years. 42% of our income was given in the form of grants to fund particular programmes like Innovative Farmers, Sustainable Food Places, and Horizon Europe funded projects. The level of grant funding grew slightly last year, as did our contract income, largely contracts with local authorities for Food for Life work in schools, and also things like the ticket sales from our very first agroforestry show. Income from our trading subsidiaries grew last year too. Our organic and FSC certification business donated its profit of 377,000, which was a small increase on the previous year. But the big increase that you can see there in the chart was from another of our subsidiaries that receives some corporate fundraising income on behalf of the charity. And that company donated 654,000 last year, a big increase on the previous year, because the company received income from a couple of corporations to fund big new projects in the charity. So what did we spend the income on? The charity's total expenditure was 8 million, which was a bit of a reduction on the previous year. A large part of that was because we accounted for money that we had thought for several years we would need to repay to a grant funder. They had part funded the purchase of a new HQ building in Bristol many years ago, but we had ended up buying a different building. And strictly speaking, the grant needed to be repaid. But last year, they kindly agreed that if we had bought an HQ building, just a different one, we could keep the bulk of the money. And reversing that creditor meant our expenditure reduced last year. But if we ignore that, then we spent almost 8.7 million on our charitable programmes. Spend on our Healthy and Sustainable Diets programme reduced as some significant funded programmes came to an end, whereas farming and land use spend increased, partly due to inflation. We are feeling the impact of recent high inflation. Everything that we do costs considerably more than it did a couple of years ago. We run a really tight ship and manage our funds very tightly. And when costs go up, to avoid cutting programmes, we need to grow our income. So we've invested further in our fundraising team, hence part of the increase that you can see there in raising funds. Plus, of course, there has been the impact on inflation on those costs too. So what was the bottom line like last year? As a charity, we don't really have one bottom line, we actually have two. All our funds are categorised as either restricted for use on very specific projects dictated by the funder, or our unrestricted funds, which are available for all our core work. Our unrestricted funds saw a surplus of 237,000 last year. If we hadn't been able to keep that HQ building grant, then it would have been a deficit of 453,000. Hence the need to keep really tight control of our costs and keep growing income into the future. Our restricted funds saw a small deficit, and overall the net result was a surplus of 158,000. So far, I've been talking about the charity, the core parts of our charitable group. But our annual accounts, which are due to be published on our website very soon, have lots more detail on the charity's finances and also include the accounts for the whole group. When we look at the group balance sheet and the group funds, a big chunk relates to other parts of the group. So that light green bit, the biggest section, represents funds that are held by the Land Trust. The Soil Association Land Trust is a separate registered charity, but the Soil Association is its only member. So we think of it as a sister charity, if you like, and it's included in our group account. It's very much part of the Soil Association family. The vast majority of its funds aren't cash and aren't available to spend, but they represent the value of all the farmland and buildings that have been given to the Land Trust to hold in perpetuity, including Woodoaks, which you're going to hear about later this evening. The orange section on the chart there is Soil Association restricted funds. Those funds that I mentioned earlier that have been donated or granted to the charity for a very specific use, but haven't yet been spent. Then we've got designated funds, the dark green portion. They're not restricted, but they're not easily available to spend. Most of that is actually the value of the HQ building in Bristol. That building's needed for the organisation's operational activities, so that money just isn't freely available for other things. Also in the designated funds is 350,000, which is a condition of our mortgage on the building, that we ring fence some funds. The remaining funds are what we call free reserves, and they are the money that's available for use in future years. We have set a reserve policy that aims to hold free reserves between 775,000 and about 1.5 million. And this range was increased slightly last year when inflation was running very high. And then trustees have decided more recently to decrease the range slightly as inflation has now reduced. The charity ended the year well within these parameters with free reserves of 932,000. So we're in a solid financial position. Looking forward to the rest of the current year and beyond, the charity, whilst beginning the year in that solid position with those free reserves within the desired parameters, is finding current times quite challenging. And whilst inflation has slowed considerably, we have seen many of our costs go up across the organisation over the last year or so. And we'll now also need to find funds to cover the increase in employers' national insurance too. However, we're also seeing many of our income streams grow, as you've just seen, and we continue to prioritise and plan really carefully so that we maintain financial sustainability, and also to make sure that we're using our funds to very best effect and having the biggest impact that we can. But the challenge is massive. So thank you so much for all of your continued support, which is so vital to our ongoing work. All this planning and strategic prioritisation is ultimately the responsibility of our Board of Trustees. Our trustees are all volunteers who give up their time free of charge to lead the organisation. We serve up to 3 terms of 4 years each, and there haven't been any changes this year. So you've just seen the current list in front of you there, which is the same as the end of last year. We try to balance the skills and experience that they provide across the board, and you can see the breadth of experience that they bring to the organisation, which includes farming and growing, forestry, business, finance, public health, communications. So a really good range of skills to lead the organisation, which is working in so many different areas. And that is a good place to stop and hand over to Helen Browning to talk a bit more about some of the impact we've been having in all the areas that we work in.
Thanks, Nicola. Really good to see everybody here today. It's great to see all these chat messages coming in from all over the place. Really, really pleased that you're with us this evening. It's always really difficult to know what to highlight for this sort of annual general meeting, because there's so much going on across the organisation. I hope you're staying abreast of what we're up to through our magazine Living Earth and through our newsletters and that kind of thing. But as you'll be aware, we are just so hugely ambitious for this decade. We set out our strategy, and kind of have my next slide, please, a few years ago, looking at where we really wanted to focus as a group over the next 10 years, to the years to 2030. And we set out, 3 big ambitions, really: that every farmer should have a viable pathway to agroecological production, that every forest should be regeneratively managed, and that everyone should have a healthy and sustainable diet. And in the charity, we focus that down a little bit more onto children, especially under our Diets and Living theme. And within the charity too, the work we do is mostly around woodlands and agroforestry, whereas our certification business is doing all that wonderful work certifying forests globally. Now, we're quite a small charity, and I think we sometimes ask ourselves, and you might ask us, how we can have such big ambitions. Trying to transform the whole of farming, the whole of the way we eat and look after the natural world is no small ambition. And I guess for me, there's kind of 2 routes to that. I mean, firstly, as you see in this diagram, we don't do this stuff on our own. We're all about joining forces for positive change, and we seek to influence what others do. Often we do that quite quietly. Often we're just engaging with other NGOs, and we're showcasing our work and brilliant stuff that's happening on the ground to policymakers. We're partnering with good businesses. And we try to change the story. that we tell ourselves about what's possible. Because in this kind of complicated world we're living at the moment, with all these threats circling around, we know we need to bring that hope and energy into the frame, whilst being realistic about the immense challenges that the world's facing. The second thing that we do so well, I think, I hope, is that we're constantly innovating. It's unusual for a charity to be quite so entrepreneurial, but it's what I love about it. It's why I guess I've been here for such a long time. We're always looking for the next doable thing that is going to really shift the dial, that's going to really help. And thinking, what's the practical thing that we can get on with in these circumstances that's going to move things forward? Where can our expertise be best deployed? What's no one else doing that needs doing right now that we can help with? And there's some really great examples of that, the way we've innovated over the last decade or two. Things like our Food for Life work, our Food for Life Served Here, for instance. I'll talk more about that in a little while. Innovative Farmers, which, we've run over 150 field labs now, showing how farmer-led research can lead to much better outcomes on the land, and how farmers can get really behind that approach. We've been championing agroforestry for the last decade or so, and it's been really exciting to see how that has now become part of DEFRA's mantra too. We now have an agroforestry scheme, something we've been really pushing for, that is now enabling farmers to get paid for doing agroforestry. And 3 or 4 years ago, we started to develop what we call Soil Association Exchange, which is where we're measuring the outcomes, the environmental and social and animal welfare outcomes on farms, and encouraging farmers, showcasing how they can get better and ensuring that they can get rewarded for their improvements. So that feels like really exciting work. And where members and donors are so important here is it gives us as a charity the headspace to innovate. And I think you get great return on your investment there, because when we innovate in these ways, we're then securing that change for the longer term by either getting policy change, as we have done with agroforestry, so that we now actually are going to embed that in the farming landscape, or through our own business models like Soil Association Exchange, which is now a separate company earning its keep and able to be sustainable, we hope, into the longer term, whilst providing loads of resources and support for farmers to get better. And Food for Life Served Here is another good example of that, where local authorities pay us to deliver that programme, especially in a lot of very deprived areas around the country. So we're always seeking those durable solutions that will allow the innovation that we do to be sustained over time, so that it has a future beyond the piloting work that we can do within the charity. And there's two reasons too why we have such impact and influence, I think, as a charity. The first is our amazing people who know what to do. I'm always really amazed. We have a sort of induction session every month where the new joiners come in and have a chat with all of the senior team. And they're coming from all walks of life with amazing skill sets. People do seem to really want to come and work with the Soil Association. I think more and more young people want to work in an organisation that has real purpose, that has real meaning. They want to do something to enable the world to take the right steps in the right directions. And often they'll take quite lowly jobs to get a foot in the door. I think we've got a really strong culture of trust with our staff around the organisation, where we know that they will be able to handle the situation that they find themselves in, and to do good work in whatever circumstances they find themselves. They've got real emotional intelligence, and I have real confidence that they will be building the right relationships. They'll be inspiring the room. They'll be delivering what they've promised to do. And the second reason that I think we have quite a lot of impact is that we have our boots on the ground. We're working with real life farmers, with caterers, with school cooks, with foresters. And that's really valued by other NGOs and by government. Understanding the barriers, the challenges, not living in some ivory tower is really what we try and bring into the discussion, and to ensure that people recognise the real challenges and opportunities that there are on the ground. So here's some of the highlights. If we go on to the next slide, it's a bit of a busy slide, but it's trying to take some of the stuff that you'll have seen in the annual report or in the impact report and turn it into some numbers that can give you real confidence that we're making some progress. I've mentioned Food for Life already, but the numbers are really big. 6,140 schools are serving nutritious and sustainable food through our Food for Life Served Here programme. That's over 1.2 million meals a day, really turning the dial. And our diet and health team are also working in a whole load of other areas. Cool Food Pro has helped caterers reduce their carbon impacts by 7 million kilograms of CO2 this year. 145,000 people got involved in Food for Life get-togethers, and 152 communities have been involved in My Food Community. We've had 175% uplift in people taking up our Green Kitchen standard, and over a third of UK local authorities are engaged with Sustainable Food Places, our partnership programme with Sustain. On the land, we've safeguarded 27 million hectares of forestry globally through our certification programme. And that's not just important environmentally, but it's really important for the people. In many places, we're working with Indigenous people who rely on those forests for their livelihoods. Our certification team are capacity building in Africa, doing really important spade work on the ground to make better forest management a reality in all sorts of places, in over 61 countries across the globe. On trees in the UK, I've mentioned agroforestry already, but last year we held the UK's first agroforestry show in partnership with the Woodland Trust, and we held that actually on my own farm in Wiltshire. We had over 1,250 farmers and foresters coming together, really bridging the gap of knowledge between those sectors, because trees on farms are a huge part of the future. Over 3,000 farmers have been engaged in our various programs. And that's not just, those are the farmers that have actually got involved with our meetings and our programs. But our amazing comms team are ensuring that what we're learning through working with those farmers is being communicated to a much, much, much broader community of farmers. So you'll hear us on Farming Today very frequently, particularly with things like Innovative Farmers, where we're showcasing some of the trials work that's been done and hopefully inspiring more farmers to get involved. And last year, over 900 farmers were benchmarked through Soil Association Exchange. That now, we've just published a report on the first tranche of that data. That's the biggest data set on the environmental outcomes on farms that we think is available, certainly in the UK, and might be one of the biggest ones globally. That's really exciting, and it's getting a lot of traction. Really exciting work, and starting to innovate new ways of bringing finance back to farm so that more farmers will be encouraged and de-risked to try new things. So there's much to celebrate, but there's still so much to do. And our spotlight at the moment is back on soils. It never leaves soils, really, but we are pushing harder here again. And you'll get more information about the campaigning work we're doing around this shortly. So many farmers recognise now the need to improve their soils. It's so different the way it was even 10 years ago, when I would go to some areas of the country to give a talk, and really farmers were still in denial about the fact that their farms, that their soils were in trouble. I don't think there's a farmer in the country now who doesn't know that actually sustaining, regenerating their soils isn't the most important thing that they need to be doing. But they lack the advice and the confidence to try new approaches and to take those first steps towards a more regenerative, agroecological, organic approach. And so we must up our reach to as many as we possibly can, and we must convince government to adopt a soil action plan which incentivizes and helps farmers to regenerate and protect their soils. Climate change is really starting to bite. I know that on my own farm, and we had the wettest autumn ever last year. This spring, it didn't dry up here enough to get cattle out onto some of our land until May. And so soils and trees are going to be a huge part of that, adapting to what's coming. And there could be no more important work, actually, than really helping farmers make the most of that to prepare for what's coming down the line. And you're going to hear lots more, actually, about soils a bit later from Eddie. But for now, I'm going to hand over to Rose Lewis, who's going to tell you about what's going on at Woodoaks Farm. And I'll be back with you later.
Hello, everyone. As Helen says, thank you. I'm Rose Lewis. I'm just going to share my slides with everyone so I can control them. Great. Okay, so it's really lovely to hear some of the impacts the Soil Association is making. And here at Woodoaks Farm, we do our own little bit. And I just wanted to talk you through a little bit about some of the things that we've been doing with the help of the Soil Association over the last few years. Just to remind you, though, Woodoaks Farm was gifted to the Soil Association Land Trust back in 2021 now. And just to remind people where it is, we've got a interesting opportunity because of perhaps where we are right on the urban edges of London. We're based just off junction 17 of the M25, right at the top end of the Colne Valley, near a town called Rickmansworth. And as you can see, the M25 cut us in half in the 80s. And we have HS2 site on one site and then a massive plan of development of housing all around the farm. So it is a sort of unique pocket of land with huge amounts of people right on its doorstep. And we think that presents a really unique opportunity really to engage the local community and beyond in some of the sort of campaigns and opportunities and ambitions that the Soil Association has. It's a real mix of habitat, 300 acres. And as you can see here, it's pasture, arable and woodland. When we inherited it, it was a conventionally run farm, and we set about starting really just to work with Sally Finley, who is the lady here. And really, you can't really talk about Woodoaks Farm until you talk about her amazing legacy. Sally is still alive at about 4 or 5 years ago when her husband, the farmer, died. After watching the farm change quite dramatically over that period, the last sort of 30 to 40 years of farming, she felt when John Finley died, that she actually wanted a better future for the farm. So when she gifted us the land, she set some wishes, and that's really my job about fulfilling the wishes of Sally. And I enjoy having a cup of tea with her every single week to talk about some of the plans and some of the changes that we're making, so she can see them. But really, first and foremost, her primary wish was to actually keep the farm a farm. And really this first objective is around promoting sustainable farming at that level. On a small farm, 300 acres, it's really important that we create this diverse set of habitats and growing spaces. And so the first thing we did was obviously start the transition with our tenant farmer, the Whitby family farm, into organic. And I thank the Soil Association and all their advisors really helping the Whitbys really transition in a very, very positive way, and really engage with the process. And finally, in September this year, we were able to announce our organic conversion across the main sort of broad acres of the farm. And it's been really an interesting process looking at the landscapes when you see it firsthand, to see how that landscape's changed in front of your eyes. And so we've introduced different herbal lays, which create very much a different set of habitats right in front of you. And we're really excited that we've created an agroforestry system, which we'll be promoting at the agroforestry show next year, which will be held at Woodoaks Farm. So we're excited about the opportunity to showcase sustainable farming to such a large group of people. And the sort of second and primary objective for Sally was really about restoring biodiversity and wildlife, and very much proving that actually you can sustain and help wildlife thrive alongside farming. And it was really important we pushed that. And thanks to some of the support that we've got from the Soil Association members, we were able to plant 2.5 kilometres of hedgerow, and we will continue to put hedgerows back into our landscapes over the coming years, along through the sort of dividing the fields back up into those smaller pockets of land to create huge amounts of biodiversity. And our market grower, who has got about 5 acres of horticulture, was telling me today how he's seeing multiple hedgehogs on his land at the moment. And that's a really exciting thing to see, where you see these diverse habitats, particularly in a market garden setting where there's lots of places for the hedgehogs to go, all of the slugs and all of those sorts of things. They really are doing some lovely things to his landscape. And really the sort of third thing, partly driven by this opportunity and our population on our doorstep, was really to bring the sort of enriching power of nature to all. We're lucky because we've got these 2 public rights of way through our farm, that people actually naturally come to the farm to walk their dogs and enjoy nature. But it's really about creating opportunities for them to really engage in the nature around them, helping them understand the farming we're doing, why we're changing the landscape, and what that brings in terms of benefits to both the wildlife, to the food production, but also for them in terms of enjoying the nature we see. So really, it's very much part of ensuring that they help, really about helping make farming visible, and sort of good farming visible to all. And then important part of our story is being about bringing the community back in and really helping Woodoaks Farm become this place for learning, connection and well-being. And that's not just for the children who come and enjoy our compost club, but through school visits that we regularly do on the farm. But it's also for a wider set of people. We've got a fairly large group of volunteers who come to the farm on a regular basis to help with hedge planting, soil management and turning our compost. And really it's about saying to them, how can we upskill those people in our communities that they can come and learn and get connected back to nature, and hopefully longer term they then care and protect it for much wider purposes. So what else have we been doing? I just wanted to give you a little more update in terms of some of the other objectives, and give you a bit more detail. We're setting out on really creating a vision for our landscape over the next 10 years. And this is a map as we acquired it for the farm. And we've just generated a new conservation management plan that sets out the vision for where we want the farm to be in the next 10 years. And as you can see, it changes quite dramatically when you look at some of the plans that we're doing. And if you want more information about this, there is a website that talks a little bit more about some of the plans that we're going to be doing over the next 10 years. But obviously, hedgerows play an important part, as do ensuring that we put trees back through our landscapes, and the agroforestry field, this sort of 70-acre field that really is a dramatic change to the eye, because it's so visible from a lot of houses around, and you can see the hedgerows going in and the trees going in and the scrub coming up. And it really is a really great way of demonstrating to our communities about what farming can do and why trees are so important. We've obviously got woodlands, and we're really excited about the opportunity to put ponds back into our landscapes, because we have no water on the farm. The farm used to be connected to the Colne River, which is to the south, but over the years development has happened and we are no longer connected to that water source. So we're excited about our plans for ponds later on. And very much part of our sort of actions is really about reconnecting people back to food growing. And we know from evidence and research that actually connecting people back to food growing really has a positive impact, not just on their health and well-being, but obviously the ability to access nutritious food, and then even coming down to the fact that they reduce their food waste when they're connected back to food growing. So we have our market garden, we have our flower grower, which offers opportunities to our community to allow them really to connect back to food growing. And we hope to launch a community orchard with our new ambitious plan as we go forward over the next few years. Helping create those opportunities for people to think differently about nature. We do a number of walks and talks around the farm using just local people who are really, really passionate about the wildlife on the farm. So this is a picture of a bunch of people walking around with some very specialist birders, and it was incredible to see their knowledge and their ability to be able to bring the nature to life by creating creating opportunities for people to see wildlife in a place where perhaps they wouldn't notice it as they just generally walked around. And then it's really important to inspire the next generation. So I mentioned earlier our work with schools, and we bring a school normally sort of once a week, once every couple of weeks. We're only primary at the moment, but we hope to see that change. And you can't help be inspired by people this young, getting their hands in soil, bringing out worms, squealing with delight. I mean, it really is quite exciting to watch. And really, it's about helping them understand how difficult it is to grow food, but also understand that actually it's really worth valuing the food. And they hope that then that helps them change even their parents when they go back and get excited about some of the stuff that they've seen at the farm. And finally, I wanted to just touch on an ambitious project we're working with the Heritage Lottery Fund. We have this magnificent 16th century barn on our farm. It is an incredible barn, and this photo doesn't do the view justice because it really is connecting a huge amount of people back into that landscape with that view. But what we're doing is we're creating an ambitious project with the Heritage Lottery, who have supported us with a development grant. And over the next year, we're working up our major grant that sees us do some pretty exciting things on the farm that will really help accelerate some of our ambitious plans. As you can see here, you've got a number of buildings connected to this 16th century barn, and we really want to use these buildings to help really create the infrastructure that we so badly need in the farm, really to be able to achieve some of our ambitious goals. And so we've got this concrete shed. Apparently it's called the new shed by some of the farmers who've worked at the farm for a long time, but it is a fairly traditional farming building, and we want to see that transformed into a community and education hub. And here is an artist impression of what that might look like, and really is it enabling us to really give that black barn, the 16th century barn, real presence in the landscape, but use the buildings to create warm, comfortable spaces where we can host our school children with classroom facilities, a kitchen, and all important toilet facilities, because there's currently none on the farm, and really give some real legs to the opportunity that we see developing at the farm. And so what is it going to do? Well, it's certainly going to help accelerate our landscape transformation. We will be planting more hedges with the money. We're also going to be looking at pond development and continuing our work with our woodland management to create a thriving landscape within that. It's all important that we're engaging more and more communities. I mean, we're really struck by the communities around our farm, because they're really multicultural, they're socioeconomic demographics, and when speaking to them, you can really get a sense that so many of them feel disconnected with nature, disconnected with farms. Many people don't even know it's a farm when they walk around, they just think it's a space. And so it's a really big opportunity to bring people that perhaps aren't always as naturally involved in food and farming and nature, to bring them back. And so we're really creating opportunities to bring those greater audiences onto the farm. And then we continue this idea that it's about educating the next generation. Given our challenges, we really need to get these generations on our side. And so we'll be looking at creating more opportunities for more school children to come right from primary right through to secondary, and then look at different types of skills that they'll be able to learn on the farm. I mentioned the community orchard, so that's about bringing people in and giving them skills to help manage that orchard in a really sustainable way. So that's it from me. I'm really looking forward to helping this steer this amazing farm to really help it achieve its ambition. And so for me now, I'm going to pass on to Eddie, who's going to come up with talk to you about soils.
Lovely. Thanks ever so much, Rose. Brilliant presentation. And thank you everybody for tuning in. So I often look at the stars on a crisp, clear night and recalling the opening narration of the original Star Trek, Space, the Final Frontier. That's showing my age. And who isn't enthralled by Brian Cox's latest series, Solar System, with volcanoes the size of Everest on Venus, nitrogen rainfall on Mars, glaciers on Pluto. If only Captain Kirk had cared to look beneath his feet for one moment, I am certain he would have become a soil scientist. It seems crazy to me that the human race has invested more in searching for life in outer space than we've tried to understand life on our own precious planet. Soil is the most diverse habitat on Earth and underpins all life on land. And yet we know less than 10% of the organisms that live there, and just a fraction of what they do and how they function. What we do know is that bacteria and fungi came together in an extraordinary series of events that led to the development and evolution of land plants. Imagine being able to transfer skills and characters to your neighbours. You might be building a kitchen, but you're not a plumber. And you could knock on your neighbour's door, a plumber, and shake hands and suddenly have those skills transferred. You know, this is what bacteria and fungi can do, and they've been doing it for millions upon millions of years. In this graphic, if you look at the little yellow stars, there's a little pond there depicting a pond on the edge of a continent. 580 million years ago, a cyanobacteria shared genes with a streptophyte algae living in a pond of fresh water that gave it the ability to survive desiccation when the ponds dried up, a vital step for life on land. It's called horizontal gene transfer, and bacteria and fungi use this superpower to support the evolution of plant and animal life, even to this day. We now know that some 100 million years later, you can see the little red star in the bottom of that graphic, a type of mycorrhizal fungi teamed up with those streptophytes, giving them access to an infinite supply of minerals from the Earth's crust. The fungi also transfer genes to protect from insect attack. The embryophytes, the liverworts, the hornworts and mosses were born. And at that point in time, the first soils began to develop. We're talking about 480 million years ago. Those soils became home to a rich and diverse range of beneficial microorganisms that we call the soil food web, including bacteria, archaea, protozoans, nematodes, and microarthropods. And they all work together to support plants. So let me introduce a few of those if you've never had the pleasure. Thanks, Gemma. So, bacteria in a compacted silty loam from a farmland down in Devon. So in a healthy soil, there are over 5 billion bacteria, some 40,000 species, each producing more than several 100,000 metabolic substances and services that support plants. There's a kilometre of fungi. There are two main types of fungi: saprotrophic fungi that breaks down organic matter and provides carbon to the soil food web. And there's mycorrhizal fungi. The mycorrhizal fungi are like the miners of the soil food web. They go and seek out minerals and solubilize them and bring them back to the plants that they associate with. And then at another level, we have protozoans. This is a naked amoeba from one of my compost heaps at home that I had a joy to find last year. If we can run that video, please, Gemma. So they search out their food by chemotaxis. And this naked amoeba, called Chaos, that's its scientific name, it was discovered in the 1880s, clearly has recognized some bacterial foods over to the top right hand of the slide, and it's moving and oozing its cytoplasm, and you can see the bacteria that's already consumed. It's moving it in that direction, looking to consume some other foodstuff bacteria in that corner. Interesting thing about these protozoans, and this is a piece of research that was published earlier this year, so we are still learning about what's going on in the soil food web. These bacteria, these protozoans, are very, very particular in the bacteria that they eat. They tend to leave alone a bacterial group called the gamma proteobacteriums, and they tend to eat the alpha and the beta gamma proteobacteriums. You don't need to remember those names, but you could Google them. And the interesting thing is, the waste products of eating the alpha and the beta feed the gamma proteobacteriums, and so their population explodes. And the interesting thing about the gamma proteobacteriums is they are experts in producing auxin. And if you know your plant hormones, you'll know that auxin is one of the key growth promoting plant hormones, particularly on root systems. And with root systems growing more rapidly because of this nutrition that they're getting through the soil food web, their roots tie more quickly into the mycorrhizal network, which means they can then concentrate their energies less on gathering food minerals, but concentrate more on photosynthesis. Now, nature also knows, back one please, Gemma. Nature also knows that every so often the soil is going to become a little bit low oxygen, anaerobic, maybe a heavy rain storm, maybe a few days of heavy rain, and your soil is going to go low oxygen. Well, the show must go on. And so these protozoans, this is a stalked ciliate. If you run the video, these guys wake up, the aerobic amoebas go dormant. And if you can look closely, you can see this one has some hairs at its aperture, and it's circulating the bacteria. They're very fussy, these particular microorganisms. They'll eat a particular kind of bacteria as well. They send out a little sort of Spider-Man stalk and hang on to, that you can see there in the picture, and hang on to some organic matter until they've finished eating what they want to eat in that particular area. Next slide, please. If we run this slide, these are nematodes. Now, Helen and Rose have talked about community engagement. Well, this was a piece of work that I helped the Country Trust with. It's called Plant Your Pants. It's a primary school initiative. Basically, in their school gardens and allotments, they buried in their soil a pair of size 38 M&S knickers, good cotton knickers, organic cotton, to see what would happen, to see how quickly they would decompose. And within the space of about 6 weeks, there was nothing left other than the elastic. And when I went down to this school in Buckinghamshire to look at the soil, I found tiny fragments of the cotton left in the soil, looked at it under the microscope in the classroom, and I came across this particular image. I have never seen so many nematodes in a soil sample, in the hundreds of soil samples that I've looked at, never seen so many nematodes. I think they've invented a new kind of composting material. If you can put some cotton in your compost, it might be a very good idea. Next slide, please. But don't take it from me. At least 90% of plants have a fungal root mycorrhizal relationship. 100% of plants outsourced to bacterial endophytes. Now, endophytes means endo, inside, phyte, plant, inside plant. We now know that every cell, every compartment of every plant has bacteria and often yeast type fungi within, providing all these substances, the secondary metabolites, within the plant. It's not just happening in the root zone. These microorganisms are being internalized and they are being used with the plants to promote their immunity, their nutrient density, and their general health. And plants spend 40% at least of their energy on connecting with these microorganisms. And that's a substantial amount of their photosynthetic product that they're putting into this relationship. So that's got to be telling us something about the importance of the soil food web microorganisms living in this incredibly diverse habitat. Soil is home and workplace to these tiny bioengineers and biogeochemists that support all life systems on our planet. And it is absolutely imperative that it's protected and nurtured. And the Soil Association is leading the way through its manifesto commitments. The vision for regeneration, driving change across 3 key areas by 2030, diets and living, working throughout society to support the transition to good food and sustainable living, and reducing humanity's environmental footprint, farming for the future, supporting a transition towards healthy connections between people and the natural world. Have you ever wondered at how lifted you feel after a walk through a species-rich wildflower meadow or woodland? Did you also know that most of the health-promoting microbiome that resides on and inside us is in the mouth and the nose? They are monitoring our environment every moment of every day and sending happiness signals to our brain, guiding us towards what is healthy and sustainable. We need to listen. When you smell that beautiful, rich, quality compost, something instinctively is telling you that it's good compost and it's good for you and it's good for the earth. Yeah, we should listen. And so these are the purposes of the Soil Association. Its 5-year mission: to explain strange new worlds in soil, to seek out a healthy life and rehabilitate civilizations, to boldly grow better together. Thank you very much indeed. And I'll now hand over to James for the Q&A session.
Thanks, Eddie. And yes, I really enjoyed the Star Trek analogy there, and I hope many of you did too. Fascinating. Soil's a true miracle, isn't it? It's that 6 inches upon which we all depend, and absolutely remarkable that the connections between soil, animals, plants, and people were understood and anticipated as much as they were by the Soil Association's founders all the way back in 1946. And I think that's becoming more true, and luckily we're all beginning to be aware how true that those original, how premonitious, if you like, those original thinkers were in terms of the challenges that we all face today. So it's now a chance to hear from some of you and to answer some of your questions. And I have the job of chairing the Q&A, which will last for the remainder of this event until probably around about 8:15, when I'll hand to Helen to close. So we've got plenty of time to dig into some of your questions, and we've had a number submitted in advance and a number on the day. So I'm going to start with some of those submitted in advance. If we don't get to all of the questions, then don't worry, we will answer them all individually. I think some of those we'll be able to answer on tonight, and we will get to them in the coming days if we don't manage to do that this evening. So if you've asked a question, we will answer it. So starting with the questions in advance, and yeah, there's a question here for Helen that I think we'll get on with. So about pesticides. So Helen, are certain pesticides used in organic food production, and which ones, please?
Thank you. And I've just responded to one in the chat too about glyphosate, and reinforcing that actually our mission is to get all of these artificial pesticides out of farming and get farmers off the chemical treadmill. Yeah, some things that are classified as pesticides are allowed in organic farming, but they're based on very natural substances. So you've got something like 300 permitted chemicals in agriculture, and there's less than 20, around 20 products that you can use in organic farming. And a lot of them are things like garlic or cloves or sulfur, those kind of things that would most of us would feel were pretty innocuous. There are one or two that I think we still need to be getting out of the system that are used in very specialist situations. Things like copper sulfate is the one that I think I worry about, which is used in extremis, and if nothing else has worked, on things like vines. It's a very old bit of chemistry, but that doesn't mean to say that it's something we really want to see going on. And so we're doing a lot of work to try and make sure that we've got alternatives to that kind of thing. But it's not the sort of thing that your everyday farmer will ever use. I mean, I've been farming organically for nearly 40 years, and I've never used any of these products. So they're very rarely used, but technically that one can be. But most of the things that farmers are using are things that you would find in your kitchen and be happy to eat. So you should be very reassured about that, I think.
Great. Thanks, Helen. So yes, if you don't recognize it, then yeah, no, absolutely. It may on occasions be needed, but in organic farming, the use of pesticides is so very much restricted. All right, so we're going to go to a very practical question now, and I'll mix up between ones that are perhaps a bit more relating to our policy and our positions, and some very practical questions. So Eddie, I'm going to come to you next, if that's okay. So
Sure.
If we were wanting to establish a wildflower area in a garden, do you have to deplete the richness of the soil? So I guess this is a point about what wildflowers are looking for.
Yeah, well, yeah, you do. In short answer, most plants need nitrate and ammonium in roughly equal amounts. But wildflowers tend to prefer more nitrate than ammonium. Now, nitrate is produced by bacteria that break down organic matter into ammonium and then rapidly into nitrate. And ammonium is also produced by saprotrophic fungi. So what you want to do is try and deplete the foodstuff of the saprotrophic fungi so there's less ammonium in the system. And that's why you take off hay crops, you take off the organic matter, you don't let that go back into the ground. That's the principle behind removing hay. You're basically not giving the fungi something to feed off, so it cannot produce as much ammonia as it does. And so you transition more to a nitrate dominated soil. And if you do that, then that benefits the wildflowers. They are more competitive compared to plant groups that like that balance of ammonium and nitrate. It's when you look at the seed microbiome, and all organic matter has its own microbiome. The seed is no different. The seed is sensing the ammonium in the soil. Now, a seed of a wildflower, an annual, what we call an early successional plant, the plants that seem to come in immediately when there's bare soil, those seeds are sensing nitrate. And if they sense nitrate and very little ammonium, they'll germinate, hence weeds and wildflowers. If those seeds sense any great level of ammonium, they just won't germinate. The seed microbiome won't let them germinate. They won't compete with the more aggressive later successional plants. So take off the hay, take it away. By taking away the hay is actually a source of these microorganisms. They live in all the little nooks and crannies and inside, as I explained earlier, inside the tissues of these plants. So if you're taking away the hay, you're also depleting the protozoans and the nematodes that, when they're actioning in the soil, eating bacteria, they're also producing ammonium. So you take the hay away, you're taking away the organic matter for the fungi, and you're taking away the protozoans that also produce ammonium. So you end up with a more nitrate-rich soil. That's the principle behind it.
Brilliant. Thanks, Eddie. And I can see one or two quite technical questions coming in. There's a tricky one on Japanese knotweed that I might get back to later on. But so have a think about that. But in the meantime, lots of interest in the work that's been going on at Woodoaks, and a couple of questions that I'm going to perhaps start with Rose on, if that's okay, Rose, in relation to that. So firstly, just tell us a little bit about how Woodoaks is modelling out and interacting with other farms and showing the way, if you like, what's possible for farmers and farming more generally. So tell us a bit about that outreach work, if you like, and also if you could say something about animal welfare, and perhaps we'll bring Helen in on those couple of points to talk about the Soil Association's broader work on those two topics. But Rose, tell us about Woodoaks first.
Okay, so I think Woodoaks, fortunately, is not completely unique. There's a lot of really, really great farmers out there that are doing similar in terms of trying to educate and inform and sort of really connect with their communities. Obviously, in the Southwest, it's easier. I suppose where we're perhaps unique, as I mentioned before, is that, you know, we're a rare farm on the edges of London, and so by just creating different access points, we can help connect people. And then it's really about going out and talking to other farmers through some of the work that the Soil Association is doing, but also through the work that we do in terms of inviting other farmers onto the farm so they can see what we're doing. We partner this year, I think it was this year, that we developed a partnership with Ocado, and Ocado, as part of their partnership with the Soil Association, is sponsoring sort of 5 demo farms that are really connecting, really showcasing some of the work that the Soil Association is doing. So I think on a broader scale, it's about what the Soil Association is doing alongside us to bring other farmers onto the same journey. Regarding animal welfare, we are, as I mentioned, announced our Soil Association's organic certification on our broad acres, and that's the pastures and our arable land. But many of you may know that it actually takes a little longer for our animals to become fully organic. So although the land got converted, is now fully converted, it is going to be 2025 before the cattle that are currently on our land have their calves, and then they become organic. The cattle is managed by our tenant farmer, the Whitbys, and they partly because of the drive that we didn't force them, but we wanted them to go on in terms of transitioning to organic. They're actually now having transitioned the rest of their other farms onto through the organic process. So obviously animal welfare is extremely important to them. But technically, I don't know whether anyone else from the Soil Association teams wants to talk more about animal welfare.
Thanks, Rose. Helen, would you like to say just a little bit about the Soil Association's knowledge exchange work? We do a lot of work, don't we, to help farmers learn from each other, which I guess is the broader example there of the work that Rose described at Woodoaks. And then perhaps just tell us about organic and animal welfare and what organic particularly stands for in relation to a good life for animals.
Yeah. I mean, organic. I guess one of the reasons I became an organic farmer was because of the welfare bit of the jigsaw. I was just so shocked when I was doing my degree in agriculture back in the 80s and was taken to the supposedly state-of-the-art pig and poultry units, and I was just horrified by what was going on there. So for me, animal welfare has been a lifelong campaign, and I came to organic because I think it's the system that delivers best for a more natural life and a more real life for farm animals. You know, they're outside whenever conditions permit. They're able to root and scratch and play and you know, and actually live what we describe as a good life. Alongside setting organic standards, the Soil Association's done loads of work in terms of defining what a good life looks like for farm animals, and actually helping embed that in other assurance schemes, or certainly making sure that some of the worst things are measured. The work we're able to do now, actually through the Ocado partnership, is taking it onto another level, and I think that will be really helpful to be able to develop the resources so that farmers can start to think about, what do my animals really need, what do they really want, in order to have the best life we can possibly give them. So for me, it's a big part of the story. I think we've been able to take on additional staff to work on animal welfare, and actually getting that extension work out to other farming systems too. And through Soil Association Exchange, we also monitor animal welfare alongside the things that most companies are most concerned about. They're concerned about carbon and stuff at the moment, but actually we need to make sure that animal welfare is always in the mix in terms of understanding the balance between the outcomes that we're achieving through our farming systems.
Great. Thanks, Helen. And but just tell us something briefly about the consumption side. There's a question from Elaine in the Q&A around, you know, the role that meat and dairy plays in our diet, and, you know, the potential to reduce or remove animals from the food chain. So just tell us briefly about Soil Association's position on animal production and the consumption end of that, if you like.
Yeah. So we've been talking for a long time about less but better meat and dairy consumption. We want to see the phasing out as quickly as possible of intensive livestock production, both from an animal welfare point of view and because of the antibiotic use, and because actually a huge amount of the world's resources are being used to feed animals. Over half the grain we produce in the UK are fed to animals rather than to people. So animals are competing in a finite world for those resources. And yet animals actually have a really important role to play on farms in good farming systems. They can be really helpful in terms of regenerating soil. They can be really helpful in terms of managing pasture lands, natural environments. You know, a lot of conservation organizations always want animals to come in and do some grazing for them. What we'd like to see is animals more, what we call livestock on leftovers. So that, you know, pigs and chickens should be eating more of our waste rather than actually eating the grain that we could be eating directly ourselves. Our ruminant animals are on pasture that is supporting biodiversity. And I think if we can find that balance, that's going to be very important. So overall around the globe, it's vital that we reduce our meat and dairy consumption, because we'll blow up the planet if everybody eats as much meat and dairy as the Americans do, or even as much as we do here. Some parts of the world, people need to eat a little bit more meat and dairy. If you're in a dietary poor situation, nutritionally poor situation, a little bit more can be really helpful. And there's lots of reasons why we've just got to get that sort of optimizing role in place. So yeah, we're really keen to try and get this right, and to keep pushing for lower amounts but good welfare and more plant-based options within our diet.
Great, thanks, Helen. I may just come back to you a little bit in a minute for a question around Soil Association Exchange, which Denise, who is on the call, has asked earlier on. Now, I'm quite tempted to try and answer James Smith's question about a certain Jeremy Clarkson, but I think the Data Protection Act isn't going to allow. But James, do ask him directly. I'm sure you'll get an honest answer on that. There have been some questions submitted in advance in relation to organic and, you know, how we see organic in terms of its availability, affordability, accessibility, and ranging. And I just thought I would go to that question. Last year, and have a go at answering that myself. Last year, we launched an initiative called Organic for All, which is a new vision for the organic sector, and it has that aim to make organic food available, affordable, and accessible for everyone in society. And we've been blown away by the response to that. It's clear that there is so much more organic food that we could be growing and producing right here in the UK. And we launched our organic market report earlier on in the year, and that really highlighted the missed opportunity. In fact, what it showed was that organic sales are growing faster than organic land area is in the UK. So we've stepped up our work this year promoting stronger policy support for organic, as it's clear that farmers won't convert, they won't switch to organic unless the right incentives are there for them to do so. And there's an opportunity with that, as many of you will be aware, with the change in government agricultural support following Brexit. And that practice is seen around the world, and that's why we see figures like 27.5% of farmland under organic in Austria, compared to just 3% here in the UK. So that really kind of gives an illustration of the size of the opportunity. So we've been working hard over the last 6 months to unblock some of that, identify the sectors and the supply chains where we can really give organic that boost, connecting up the key players. So I remember we held an arable roundtable, for example, earlier on this year to understand how we could release the potential for organic arable crops in the UK, many of which are imported. I think about 90% are imported, and they could be grown here in many cases for lots and lots of different reasons, but that's a huge puzzle to unlock. And at the same time, we need to think about the consumption side, don't we? So the scope to make organic food more affordable in particular. So organic has to be valued, it has to be supported, but it also has to be available and affordable. So there has to be easy access to organic food at home, but also in public settings such as schools and hospitals. We want to work closely with retailers so that they expand their organic product assortments, they position organic better in stores, they ensure markups are fair, and they help people access organic through the way in which they price organic. Not necessarily, and I don't think we ever anticipated that organic would or should become, a premium offer for the few, if you like, for it to be available and affordable and accessible to everyone. It has to be marked up fairly by the grocery retailers in particular, as well as supporting them to communicate the why. Alternative routes to market also really important in relation to that growth, bringing people close to the source of their food, such as box schemes, community initiatives as well, vital for addressing unequal access to healthy organic food. And our Food for Life work is all about bringing organic and higher environmental value food, healthy and sustainable diets into everyday settings like schools and hospitals and so on. So an awful lot still to do on organic to realize that potential, both on the production and on the consumption side. So Helen, I'm going to come back to you if that's okay, and go to that question, last one, I think perhaps for today. So that means that Eddie has avoided the tricky Japanese knotweed one. But just tell us a little bit about this relationship between the Soil Association and Soil Association Exchange to finish up.
Thanks, James. Yes, the Soil Association Exchange was born out of the charity. And actually, James and I both did a lot of work on it for several years before it was floated off into its own separate business. So because it now is earning its own keep, it's in a separate corporate vehicle. And like our certification business, as it earns profits, some of that will come back into the charity. But I think it's a really good example of where we've seen a real need for farmers to understand how they're getting on, what's working well on the environmental front, and as I say, to make sure that we're measuring other things as well, animal welfare, social impacts, nutrients, as well as the sort of carbon and the biodiversity. So we will really benefit from the data that comes out of that. We're learning a lot from that data, and as I say, we just published some stuff just now. So that's the relationship. The like certification, it's a separate business with its own funding stream. So we're not putting charitable funding into Exchange, but it's a really good example of how we can innovate these new ideas and then set them free into the world so that they can do good work. And really, I think Exchange will really shift the dial. It's getting great traction, and I'm really excited about what it's achieving. It has its own chief executive, Joseph Gridley. Some of you will know him, and a great team there. We all work very closely together. But does that kind of cover the question, Denise? I hope it does.
Thanks, Helen. Yes, and a huge potential in helping farmers, kind of measure and then improve and access reward for improving the overall ecological health of our farm and also of their farms, and also a huge evidence base that can come from that around what's possible, the difference that organic and different practices are making to those outcomes. So it really does feel like it's going back to that spirit of inquiry around what's possible and innovating those solutions and then seeding them into the world. Well, look, our time is just about up, and I'm about to hand back to Helen for to close the meeting and say a final thank you. But apologies finally to those questions that we haven't got to. Lots of great ones around partnership, our relationship with other charities. Apologies, we will try and answer those ones around organic and biodynamic. I can see, and thank you very much for all the positive comments as well as the questions that have come in through those lines on the chat and Q&A. So look, Helen, over to you just to say a final few words.
Thanks so much, James. Really good, great questions. I was going to try and answer the partnerships one in the chat, but I realized it was going to take me all night. There are so many people we work with, so many organizations we work with, that it really would take about half an hour to give you the list. But we will, as James has said, we will get back to you with the questions that we haven't managed to answer here today. And always send your questions in. If you've got stuff that you're interested in, what we're up to, just keep in touch with us, because it's really helpful to know what our members are thinking about, what their views are, what you're interested in. And it's particularly nice, as in the chat today, when you've been so warmly enthusiastic about the great work that the team are doing. I'm so pleased that you feel inspired by that. And just to say again, I can't thank you enough for all your support. It makes, what you do for us makes everything else possible. Things like Soil Association Exchange would never have been born without members like you, supporting this organisation to give us the headspace to create these things that I think are making a real difference in the world. I'm so pleased you've enjoyed our soil session with Eddie, and I hope you feel increasingly inspired and engaged to learn more and more about soils, because I think we're all still learning. Even at this stage of my farming career, I feel there's a whole new wealth of learning opening up, and we want to really be part of that and help farmers and growers and gardeners improve their performance and do still better. And yes, if you've enjoyed what we do, if you're proud of what we do, please tell others about us, and maybe give the gift of membership to someone you care about for Christmas this year. Because the more members we have, the more influence we have, the more we can do, the more we can grow, and we can achieve the ambitions we've set out, those tough ambitions for the future. Thank you all so much, and hope you have a chance to now enjoy your supper. And thanks again for joining us. Good night.